the coordinator of ELA, ELT, and literacy at the Contra Costa County Office of Education. And it is our honor and privilege to be able to be here with you today, to be able to share about Project Arise, which is a part of the Reading, Instruction, and Intervention Grant. This is our first in a series of fall workshops, and we have 2 more after this. And we are so excited to have you join us as we start to engage in the conversation about how we are addressing some of the gaps in reading instruction we may see. And the unique and wonderful part of Project Arise is that we also combine executive functioning along with that. We have many brilliant partners alongside of us in our work, and many of them are on the call today. So I just want to give a shout out. If you are one of our partners, can you just give a big wave and let everybody know kind of you're here and who you are for things? Thank you. So San Diego County Office of Education, Glenn County Office of Education are our county office partners, and they are in partnership for us as we kind of span across the beautiful state of California to ensure that each of the geographical areas are accurately represented within our populations, to ensure that when we are thinking about reading instruction and intervention, the assessments, interventions, and all of the pieces that go along with it, that we are thinking about who we are serving. And so it provides us unique partnerships to be able to collaborate together. In addition, we have funding from the California Department of Education. I see Eve on this call, and she is a great supporter and advocate alongside of us as we kind of go through this project and this grant together. We have the University of La Verne. We have UCSF. I see Fedra here on this call, and they are working extremely hard on the multitudes assessment pieces. We have TNTP, and I see Tori on this call. And then we also have the Center for Whole Child Education, who we are going to be learning a little bit more about. We have Gretchen and Jasmine both with us today. So again, we are so thankful for these partnerships, because it is the work of many that we know are going to make a difference in the lives of literacy for our students. Project Arise is a part of the Reading Instruction and Intervention Grant, and it is to provide professional learning for K-12 educators statewide. So that means all of our educators, that's our classified staff, our teachers, our administrators, our leaders. And the purpose of it is to be able to really ensure that we are meeting the needs of students who may have a disability or dyslexia, and our students who are dually identified, which means they may have another language, and they may also have, some special needs that we're considering as we're doing this. We take a very asset-based approach in all of the pieces that we're doing, honoring the assets that each of our students is bringing forward, as well as each of our educators. And we know our power lies that when we know more, we're able to do more and to do better. The topics for our professional development and learning include intensive literacy interventions, support for executive functioning skills, the celebration of diversity and that assets-based approach, and a pedagogy of equity and family involvement. We know when all of our systems are working coherently and together, that we can make a difference in literacy for all of our students. The very kind of baseline part that we have available, if any of you have not had a chance to be able to dive into, is we have free online learning modules. And these free online learning modules are asynchronous and, again, available for all California educators. The content includes executive functioning and literacy, literacy as equity, foundational skills, comprehension and knowledge building, and intensive intervention. The intensive intervention portion is to be able to think about how are we fitting all of that learning and all of the pieces around some of the assessments into that system, so that we're making sure that we're using data to be able to inform some of our decisions. And with that, I'm going to welcome our beautiful partner today. And we have the Center for Whole Child Education out of ASU. And we are so excited to be able to learn alongside of them about executive functioning and literacy. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jasmine.
Hi, everyone. Here this afternoon, Jasmine Hernandez-Lovezo here. I'm going to start setting up my tech. So while I'm doing that, take a few mindful breaths, maybe a little stretch, and start thinking about your core values. Okay, I'll be back in a sec. All right, Michelle, here we go. Okay, Michelle, can you see me okay? Great. Okay. So as we start this afternoon, we have about an hour and 10 minutes together. You will see my colleagues, Gretchen Livesey and Carolyn. They're also here with us today. We are remote across the country. So I'm coming to you from my home office in Sacramento. There are two tiny humans with their Nelly in my house somewhere. So in case you hear them, that's who they are, but they're taken care of. Don't worry, but have my colleagues here for backup. So here you see a core value selector. This is an activity we do with our young people, with our teams across the country. I want you to start thinking about which one of these core values, or two or three if you can't pick one, is most responsible for powering the work that you do each day. And if your core value is not there, please feel free to add it. Start thinking. When you've got it, you're going to put it in the chat. You can also share your name, your role, where you're coming to us from, what your core values are. I'm going to put them back on the screen. Kindness, I love that. Growth, yes. Humor, yes. Each of us as an individual more easily leans into our work when we feel our core values are ignited and respected. We'll talk more later about belonging and how our core values can help us and our young people and our colleagues that we work alongside deepen our sense of belonging. Family, I see that. Yes. Family, knowledge, I love these. Thank you all so much for putting them in the chat. Let us know who you are, what school or district you're located in. Let's see, I see Huntington Beach City School District. Welcome, welcome everybody. We're so glad that you're here. Brentwood, Michelle is not too far away from me. I'm trying to get her to come and have lunch with me one of these days. Orinda, Humboldt County. So great, welcome everyone. So if you'd like to get out your phone, you can take a picture of this QR code. It's a full core values list, and a major shout out to Elena Aguilar, a Bay Area incredible educator. Here's a full list of core values. And before we get started, we also have something else with you. So at Turnaround, that was our former name. We just transitioned to ASU, and now we're the Center for Whole Child Education. But at the center, we have a free toolbox accessible to educators across the country. And you can, again, take out your phone, take this QR code. This is a quick tool that you can use with your young people. It's called the Norms and Expectation Planner. It's an activity that you can use at the beginning of the year in advisory, also with your teams to lean into that core values and sense of belonging. Okay. I'm just looking at the chat. Family, yes, I love that. Okay, so here are some norms for today. We're going to set some intentions, and we want to make sure that you check in often. We know that you've had a long day of work. It's 3:40, so make sure you're taking care of yourself, doing some stretches, some mindful breathing. Leverage this time and this space. You have educators across the state here in the space with us. Engage in the self-care and share and receive. Gretchen is in the chat, so feel free to share any thoughts, anything that's resonating with you in the chat. Yep, I see that. Gretchen is there. She'll get the links for us. So I'm Jasmine Hernandez-Lovezo. I'm a partnership director here at the center. I've been in education for probably a little over 15 years. The preschool teacher, ESL for adults teacher, early elementary, K first, second, third, family coordinator, a coach, an assistant principal, district leader. And I was actually a partner with Turnaround for Children in the Bay Area alongside Gretchen. I heard all of this incredible science, and I finally had the language for things that I knew that I believed about our young people, about our schools. And so I've been at the center now for a little over 2 years, working with educators across the state of California, across the country, supporting them with whole child design and purpose. And I am so glad to be here with you today. I'm a Central Valley girl. I'm from Turlock. I live now in Sacramento, was a teacher in Los Angeles, and spent most of my career in the San Francisco Bay Area, being a teacher and leader in Oakland. So, well, a warm welcome, especially to those Bay Area folks, Central Valley, Los Angeles. So glad you're all here with us. My family is Mexican. I'm a Latina. I am a wife of Adam. We met in algebra class many, many years ago, and I have Louis and Mateo, my 2 sons. A little bit about me. So glad to be here with you today, and so glad to be here on behalf of the Center for Whole Child Education. We are part of the Teachers College at ASU, and we have been working with teachers across the country. And what we know, what we're hearing from everybody, is that our teachers are struggling with socializing our young people, with our young people knowing how to work together, how to play together, how to talk to each other. But at the center, we believe that the science is optimistic. And we know that the science of learning and development helps us create the conditions for learning that we need for all of our young people. We hope that each and every young person learns and develops in settings that are intentionally designed for them to thrive. We have advanced key insights from educators. We advance key insights from educator, practice, scientific research, and student experience so that together we can create equitable learning environments and settings that affirm the strengths, meet the needs, and fully develop the abilities of each and every young person. So how do we do that? So we used to believe that genes were the drivers of who we became, including our intelligence. We believed that talent was scarce and was distributed like a bell curve, with most in the middle. So we built this system to select and sort. But today we know that talent is everywhere and that there are many pathways to develop it. We used to believe that an average score stood for an individual. Today we know that average rarely represents an individual. We used to believe that in the factory model that required lots of memorization, and we thought that was a good and efficient way of educating kids. Today, we know that agency and engagement matter far more to higher order skill building. We used to believe the potential of a young person was knowable in advance. And today we know that we can't see the potential unless we design the environment to reveal it. Here's a quote from Camille Farrington. The foundational structures laid in the 1800s and early 1900s still largely dictate the type of education most students receive, regardless of if our beliefs and goals might or might not have changed. It's critical to understand that the percentage of children who benefited from this system is and has always been small. So I ask you, who are the children who this system was designed to benefit, and who has it not benefited? Feel free to put that in the chat. Take a minute to read that quote to yourself. Think, who are the children who this system was designed to benefit? And my follow-up question is, who has this system not benefited? Feel free to put your responses in the chat. Thanks, Holly. Absolutely. Our system has not benefited students with disabilities. Has not benefited students who have faced trauma and adversity. Gretchen's in the chat. Feel free to keep responding. Yes, thanks, Nicole. It was designed for children who are compliant, was not designed for questioning, not designed for bilingual students, those with disabilities. At the center, we know that we must redesign for and with equity. We must directly confront and address institutional oppression and discrimination based on race, class, language, disability, gender, these things that have long prevented too many students from living the lives they choose. We know that this redesign will only be successful if we leverage and include the voices, assets, and experiences of our entire community, educators, students, families. Together, we can create learning settings that are rich in protective factors that promote wellness and protect children from the damaging effects of stress all at the same time. It's both our why and the process through which transformational change happens. And like I said earlier, the science is optimistic. We have the knowledge today to dramatically change the student experience. So at the center, we have this whole child design blueprint. As you start glancing over it, these are probably so many of the things that you already do in your classroom, in your schools, things that you see across the state of California, things that you know in your core to be true and needed for our young people. So educators are given this critical and challenging task of creating learning experiences that truly support each child in their holistic development. This process requires us to confront and dismantle and reimagine the systems of education that we talked about earlier, that we have inherited that do not yet equitably or effectively serve our students. We know that the science of learning and development can be used as a lever for equity instead of a tool of oppression as it has historically been used. This blueprint of the science of learning and development and years of experience working in educational settings, this framework has components and core practices that help us think about, organize, and integrate the non-negotiables for the settings that we want to create for our young people. So the science of learning and development, what drew me to the Center for Whole Child Education. I'm going to give you just a little overview. Here is another QR code, and Gretchen can also share this link if you want to dive deeper into our science, but today is just overview. So our work is grounded in 5 key science principles. Development is bi-directional. In 2006, researchers Fisher and Bedell explained there is no separation of nature and nurture, biology and environment, or brain and behavior, but only a collaborative coordination between them. It is our DNA together with our experiences that shape our development, not one or the other. It is the interaction between biology and our external environment that determines who we become. Although our DNA is composed of over 20,000 genomes, fewer than 10% ever get expressed. Developmental and learning science tell a very optimistic story about what all our young people are capable of. Children's brains, bodies, and abilities are malleable to experience because the human brain is a dynamic, living structure made up of tissue that is the most susceptible to change from experience of any tissue in the human body. Most of the growth of our brains happens after we are born. So let's go one step deeper into the science. The second key principle is context matters. And we're going to keep talking about this throughout our session. The fact that our brains are malleable is both an opportunity and a vulnerability, depending on the context, whether it's positive and supports healthy development or negative and unsupportive. Context is the primary driver of who we become. Relationships and experiences influence our lifelong learning and health. So let's dip quickly into one of the most prevalent examples of negative context, stress. A small amount of stress is actually helpful for our focus. When we experience stress, though, cortisol floods our brains and bodies, and it produces that familiar feeling of flight, fight, or freeze. I'm sure many of us have had this feeling. It makes us alert and sharp, helps us prepare for an event. This is the limbic system at work. Attention, concentration, focus, memory, all support strong performance. However, when the amygdala senses danger, it kicks off the alert, releasing cortisol through the body, the fight, flight, or freeze. When the amygdala is triggered, the hippocampus is also flooded with cortisol, which makes it shut down. No time for remembering or learning, just run, fight, drop. The same thing happens to the prefrontal cortex. No time for thinking or planning, just straight to action. Our heart beats faster, our blood pressure increases, we start sweating, stomach shrinks, our brains are working to keep us safe. And then we know how it feels to recover from such an event. We're a little shaky. But let's imagine if we experience stress and cortisol, but have no buffer. But like I said earlier, the science is optimistic. We have oxytocin to counterbalance the impacts of cortisol. Oxytocin is released when we experience trusting relationships. Trust is the antidote to stress. I want us to think of when we have felt a trusting relationship and what that's felt like for us as adults, as colleagues, what oxytocin feels like for us. Oxytocin. This is why the effects of trauma are reversible. Relationships that are strong and positive even produce resilience to future stress. When we speak about the human relationship, we are not just talking about being nice to a child. We are speaking about a connection that is built through consistent caring, protection, presence, and trust. This kind that can make a child believe something about themselves that they couldn't believe until you entered their life. And I want to point out that the primary energy source for the wiring of the brain is human connection. And just as important as the connections you make with your students and your young people, maybe even more important are the connections you make with your colleagues and your teaching teams. These strong relationships with your peers provide a force field of oxytocin around you, allowing you to be your best teaching self with your young people. So now to our third key science principle. Learning is integrated. It is social and emotional. This happens within the context of our social connections and relationships and driven by how we feel. Emotions can either help or hinder our learning. As far back as the 17th century, it was believed that rational thinking was separate and divorced from emotion. However, newer research tells us that emotions guide our behavior and decision-making and unlock our potential to learn. More productive learning occurs when we are emotionally engaged. Our brains are connected. When we are angry or stressed, our amygdalas take over and prevent us from accessing the learning, memory, and regulation parts of our brain. There has been this false dichotomy. Here's a quote from Mary Helen Immordino Yang. We're going to watch a clip of her shortly, but I just want to bring this quote to the forefront. Emotional processes are structurally and functionally intertwined with and often the same as the cognitive capacities required for learning. And I want you just to think back about what we said about our education system and what we've been taught. And what we've been taught about academics and SEL, about learning and emotions. Now we're going to watch this short clip from Dr. Mary Helen Immordino-Yang. We're going to be sending out a short newsletter after this, so we'll include the link to this video if you want to watch the whole thing, but we'll just watch a small piece together now.
Yang. I'm an affective neuroscientist and an educational psychologist at the University of Southern California. And I study the ways in which children's emotional and social relationships shape their learning and also shape the brain development that undergirds their learning so that they can learn better into the future. And I'm going to start my talk with a picture of my children's jack-o'-lanterns from a few years ago. And the reason is that I think that the jack-o'-lanterns are a really fantastic visual metaphor for how children learn. Inside of each one of those little pumpkins is a fire burning, a fire that consumes oxygen and that shines out through that child's actions and through that child's beliefs and through that child's learning in the world. And, you know, historically we've thought, and scientists even thought, that emotions interfere with clear-headed thinking, that in order to learn well, we needed to get our emotions out of our thought, we needed to take our self out of it, we needed to take our feelings out of it, and instead just focus in a kind of pure way on the cognitive skill that we're trying to develop. And what we're learning with our new neuroscientific research is that nothing could be further from the truth in the way that human brains actually learn. And this makes good sense evolutionarily because the ordinary purpose of our brain is to keep us alive. It's to steer our actions and our thoughts and behaviors so that we remember the things that matter, so that we learn the things that we think are going to need in the future, and we don't attend to or spend a lot of time thinking about the stuff that we think doesn't matter or that we think is not important. To demonstrate what I mean, I have a little poem written by a kindergartner about her baby brother named Theodore. She calls him Teddy. And you can see a little picture of her up here with her little pink dress and crayon. And underneath, she's written out her poem. And it says, "Oh, Teddy, we love you more than the whole earth size. As the earth spins every day, we love you as much as usual, but sometimes even more, as you make us proud and happy that you're you." I have a simple question for you. Is that a poem about this little girl's love for her baby brother? Or is that a poem about her budding knowledge of planetary science? Our emotions and our relationships and our cultural experiences in the social world literally organize and shape the development of brain networks that allow us to learn. Over the course of the morning,
I love that video, and I hope you get a chance to see the whole thing. I'm going to just give you a second.
you're going to hear
What's resonating with you from what you heard Dr. Mary Helen Immordino-Yang say? Feel free to put it in the chat. Would love to hear from you. He says, it is literally neurobiologically impossible to think about things deeply or remember things about which you have had no emotion. Our reality and how we structure learning is shaped by our emotions. That's right, Sophia. Emotional attachment and investment can lead to stronger learning. Yes, absolutely. Love hearing from all of you. So if we lean into this fact, then it becomes incumbent on every educator to think about how to encourage social and emotional connection in the learning context, which many teachers have resisted because some students struggle to manage strong emotions, or have not yet fully developed their executive functions, or don't yet have relationship skills needed to navigate collaborative projects. Too often, kids who need support to grow these skills end up labeled as kids with special needs or difficult kids, which can adversely impact the availability of services and interventions for students who truly need them. When educators understand that learning is integrated and mindfully integrate the development and support of SEL skills into academics, more students will have access to rich learning. Which leads us to our fourth key science principle. Every child is on their own unique developmental pathway. But we have not designed schools to support each child. Instead, what we did, what the Air Force did when they were first commissioning jet fighters. So there's this video, Gretchen will share the link, it's called The Myth of Average. So to save money, the Air Force asked that these new jets be designed to fit the average pilot. But then as they rolled these out and pilots started flying them, they experienced a lot of crashes. Why? They had many ideas, but one smart person decided to think about the cockpit and how it might either be supporting or not supporting pilots. So they studied thousands of pilots to see how many of them were average across the dimensions of their body, their height, their weight, their leg and arm length, their shoulder breadth, and the number of pilots found to be average across all the dimensions was 0. It turns out when you design for the average, you are actually designing for no one. That was so heavy to hear when I related it to my experience in school as a teacher, as a leader, as a coach. So the Air Force changed its directive and asked for the jet fighters to be designed to the margins, to adjust to fit the tallest, the shortest, the heaviest pilot. And we have all benefited from this technology. Just think about how your car seats adjust now, so much safer. But we haven't yet caught up in education. We are still designing for the average student. We think about kids being on grade level or judged as behind or advanced, rather than just acknowledging that each and every kid is on their own developmental pathway and designing our classroom to the margins. The science of learning and development clearly shows that each child develops via pathways that are nonlinear and jagged instead of along a fixed and stable course. If anything is coming up for you, please put it in the chat. We would love to hear from you. I know my heart still sinks when I hear these science principles, what I did and didn't do as a teacher. Which leads us to our final science principle that wraps up all the others. If we know these science principles to be true, that development is bidirectional, context matters, and pathways are unique, then only way we can truly understand our students is by listening to them. What are their experiences? What are their relationships and environments that have shaped them? What does their context mean for their learning and our teaching? And because of our fourth science principle, learning is integrated, we cannot hope to connect them to the learning process and academic content without making the social and emotional connections to them and their lived experiences. Our third science principle. Nor can we hope to have them own their own learning and development if we don't see ourselves as partners with students, helping to support and guide them on their own unique pathway of lifelong learning and development. So we are all in the beginning of the school year where we take so much time to set up our classrooms. I remember putting up those bulletin boards, making sure all my students' supplies were labeled, everything was perfect for them, that it felt warm and safe and organized and beautiful for them to come in. We're going to take a step deeper into setting the conditions for learning, not just what our rooms and our schools look like, but what they feel like. So I'm going to ask one or two of you to come off with me and share. This is a question I have for you. Think about a situation, a place, or an environment where you feel a sense of belonging. What does that feel like? And what makes that experience special? We know that belonging is both objective and subjective. It can be quantified and measured, but it is also perceptual, laying in the eye of the beholder. In this respect, belonging, unlike both equity and inclusion, contains a psychological component, an affective component, which shapes the way social groups regard whatever it is they're regarding. If members of a social group feel as if they belong, then belonging exists. But if they do not, despite being included and having little tangible resource inequities or other disparities between groups, then belonging is lacking. I would love for one or two people to share when they felt a sense of belonging. Feel free to come off of mute. I know it's a 4 o'clock on a Thursday, but I would love to hear from you. I've been talking so much. I would love to hear from you.
This is Sophia, and really it's about being seen as unique, and that listened to, that you feel like you belong somewhere.
Love that. Can I have one more person share? Thank you so much, Sophia, for coming off mute.
I'll go.
Great.
Sorry, my camera's off. I'm traveling.
That's okay.
The sense of belonging to me would feel like I'm being supported. And I feel like what makes that so special is when people follow up about things that I've told them, where I know when working with children, it's meant a lot to them when they tell me something the week before and I follow up and say, hey, you told me about your uncle's birthday. How did that go? And just making sure that students feel supported and like the last person shared, that they feel heard.
I love you. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I was reading in the chat.
I love you too.
Thanks. The barn where I go horseback riding. That's what I get for trying to read and talk at the same time. The barn where I go horseback riding. I feel supported to grow. I know where to find what I need, and I am welcomed when I arrive. Great. Anyone else want to share? Okay. So, Bay Area folks, there is a incredible educator at Cal, John A. Powell. We're going to hear from him, but again, we'll share all of the links and resources in our newsletter, but we're going to watch a short 3-minute clip from John A. Powell on structural racism and belonging. I want to hear from you after this. So just encouraging voices. Here we go. 1 second. There we go.
The issue for the 21st century is belonging and othering. Belonging and othering. And when you belong, a lot of good stuff happens. In fact, I argue that in Britain, that the #1 good that a society extends to a population or withholds is a sense of belonging. This is your country, this is your community. And it's not just an idea. It's how do I reflect that idea? I reflect it in terms of tax policy, I reflect it in terms of schools, I reflect in terms of who I listen to. And you've all been in a place where you walk in and you feel like, this is not my place. We know in terms of schools, there was a incident at Texas, UT Austin, but it's now been replicated all over the country. Blacks and Latinos were graduating at a much lower rate than whites. About 20% were graduating in 5 years, 80% for whites, about 30 to 35% for Latinos. And they spent millions of dollars on remedial programs to help those Blacks and Latinos do better. And the article, it's a New York Times article, starts off by saying, maybe blacks just can't cut it. You know, I mean, they try hard, and Latinos, well, you know, okay, they're not necessarily that smart, or maybe that, you know, English is not their first language. So maybe they should go, as Justice Scalia suggested in a recent Supreme Court case, maybe they should go to schools that are not so hard. And there's a professor there who pulled these students together. And he said, let's talk about your experience. Now, as a personal note, I was recruited to UT Austin to be a professor there. It's a great school. I love Austin. It's in a funny state, but it's a great school, great place. And they're taking me around the campus and they're saying, you know, don't pay attention to all this Confederate memorabilia. We're a welcoming school. So they had all of these things to indicate that this wasn't my place. Now, as a professor, I probably could manage that and navigate it, but I can tell you at unconscious level, it's having an impact. And so when they pulled these students together, almost all of them talked about, this is not my place. I feel very alienated. And just talking about it and helping students to get comfortable with it, within a very short period of time, blacks and Latinos start graduating at almost the same rate as whites. It wasn't a question of lack of capacity, it was a question of lack of belonging. And once they had a sense of belonging, their performance shot up. And it shot up so fast that researchers around the country said it's not possible, but it was possible. And so we do things with our structures, with our systems, with our money, with our stories to say, you belong or you don't belong. And sometimes it's just numbers. You walk into
I encourage you to watch the rest of this. It's really
a
wonderful.
place.
I would thanks Gretchen for sharing that in the chat. The visual cues relate so much to what John A. Powell was saying. It wasn't a question of lack of capacity. It was a question of lack of belonging. And I want you to think, what does that mean for our classrooms, for our schools, as we set the conditions for learning? What does belonging mean? Please feel free to put any thoughts in the chat. That's right, when our identity is not othered and instead included. After students were supported with affinity groups, they started graduating at almost the same rates as white students. It's not that they weren't smart. It's not that they didn't have the abilities. They just didn't feel like they belonged. So what does the science of learning and development tell us about why the sense of belonging is so important? So 2 reasons. The first is about the effect of exclusion in the brain. I'm going to describe this cyberball experiment. So in the 80s, the author of this experiment was at a park with his dog when a Frisbee rolled up and hit him in the back. The author, not the dog. He turned around and saw that 2 other guys were looking at him. And so he threw the Frisbee back to them. And he was surprised when they, kind of included him in the game and threw the Frisbee back to him. And so he walked towards them, made a triangle, he threw it back again. So for about a minute, the 3 of them threw that Frisbee around in a spirited game of catch. And what happened next sparked an idea as to how to study the effects of being ostracized. So for no apparent reason, the 2 original players started throwing the Frisbee only to each other, and they never threw it back to the newcomer again. So after sheepishly backstepping toward his dog, he was amazed at how bad he felt. He was sad, embarrassed, a bit angry, and he had wondered what he had done to warrant being treated like that by the other 2 players. He sought comfort from his dog, and then it occurred to him that something like this be adapted for a laboratory, and it would be an excellent means to study ostracism and social exclusion. So Cyberball is a game designed to replicate that experience of the researcher in the park. They enter the game where the ball or disc is being passed back and forth between 2 other players, and at some point the participant is included in the game, and then just as suddenly the game goes back to being between the 2 other players. So in the experiment, the participants played a game of Cyberball. While there was a study of their brain, an MRI scan, and it shows that social exclusion is processed in the same brain areas that process physical pain. So feeling like you don't belong hurts, literally. It's happening in our brain. And the second related reason is about cognitive load. So if you look at our cognitive load, you look at our working memory capacity, when stress and pain are there, there's no room for new input. And think about what it's like to concentrate or work when we're stressed or sick or in pain. And then imagine what it's like if that stress is ongoing and never lets up. When our working memory is overloaded, it compromises our students' ability to hold on to new learning and transfer it to their long-term memory, whether their cognitive load is overwhelmed by what's happening in the classroom or by worries and preoccupations about what's happening in their lives outside the classroom. The cognitive load is holds a finite amount of new information. So think about our young people. I see faces popping into my mind about students who came in already in the morning with their cognitive load overloaded because of the stress that they had experienced at home, with the experiences in their communities. What's it like for that young person to come into the classroom and try to absorb all of the new learning that's happening in their classroom? But like I said, the science is optimistic. There's 3 ways that we can create belonging and set the conditions for learning. Human developmental relationships. Human beings are relational. And from this recognition emerges 2 essential developmental understandings. The first is that strong relationships build strong brain architecture, providing critical avenues to learning and growth. Relationships are the strongest example of a positive context and are central to how children learn new skills, develop identities, and seek out pursuits, activities, and vocations. Relationships provide a protective buffer to the negative impacts of chronic stress. Oxytocin is released through trusting relationships. It protects our young people at a cellular level from the damaging effects of cortisol. Supportive environments. Trust is maintained where we are in supportive environments. Environments where we are less likely to experience stress and the cortisol it triggers, and more likely to have positive relationships and experiences like a sense of belonging that maximize oxytocin. Knowledge, skill, and mindset building. We are all brain builders. The decisions that we make every day in classrooms, on the playground, in the lunchroom, they determine whether students have the opportunity to reveal and practice the skills and mindsets that they will need throughout their lives. We do this by building relationships, creating supportive environments, and intentionally supporting students' skills and mindsets through all of our interactions. So I want to talk to you about the building blocks for learning. It is a framework for the development of skills that children need for success and beyond at school. So I'll have you take a quick look at this, and so many of these things we already know, we already believe. You all are doing incredible things in your classroom. So they represent a developmental progression from foundational to higher order skills. But remember, development is not linear. Now I want to talk about executive functions. Executive functions act like our brain's air traffic control system. They manage information, avoiding distractions, and adapting in the moment to achieve our goals. Executive functions are critical and intertwined with reading and writing skills on a neurobiological level and based on what we can observe in students. There's so much interconnectedness and interdependencies between executive function skills and literacy skills. For example, students' abilities to recognize letters, connect sounds, sound out words, interpret words with multiple meanings, monitor for errors in reading. So you'll learn more about executive function and how it's connected to our brain science in our modules. But today we're just giving a very slight overview, but we encourage you to look at our incredible modules written by our amazing colleague, Laura Sykes, who is not here today, but she is absolutely brilliant. But I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what I mean when we say executive functions. Like I said, there's a set of skills and they act like our brain's air traffic control system. Our inhibitory control, our working memory, cognitive flexibilities, they help us to create more complex skills like problem solving, reasoning, planning, organizing, self-monitoring. Reading equals hard mental work. And executive function integrate and synchronize the many sub-processes that are involved in reading. And like I said, executive functions are critical and intertwined with reading skills. Here's a few ways, I won't read them to you, but this is a few ways in which they're interconnected. You'll find more in our modules, which we are so excited about. But we want to go back to what effectively supports executive functions and literacy. Context. Context matters. It's the primary driver of who we become. The internal context, emotions and stress, and the external context, environments and relationships that children experience have a huge impact on their executive functions. Without addressing the context, we will not effectively support students' ability to use executive function in their literacy. Effective executive function skill building is most effective when it is within a student's unique zone of proximal development, when it is in authentic context, and when there are opportunities for repeated practice. So we're getting to the end of our time together. In virtually every study that has ever been done about positive youth development, there is one finding that is always right at the top. Children can't develop, learn, or perform when they don't feel physically and emotionally safe, and they engage and perform best in settings in which they feel they belong, where they are part of a community, where they are safe. And remember, the science is optimistic. We can create the conditions for our young people to succeed in literacy in all subjects throughout the day. You are all doing incredible work with our young people. We are so thankful that you're here. We encourage you to join our future workshops, to take our modules. We're going to set an intention. We're going to go back to our core values selector. Which one of your core values is most responsible for powering the work you do every day? It's so important for us to remember these core values and how they influence the work that we do. My core values are hope, family, justice, just a few of them. They help me deepen my sense of belonging, my personal and professional life. When we listen to our students' core values, it can deepen their sense of belonging in the classroom, in the schools. When you hear what your colleagues' core values are, it can deepen the trust, create a supportive environment. It can help you work together with that sense of belonging to create the setting that our young people need to thrive. So now I want you to think of what you heard today, just an overview of the science of learning and development, setting the conditions for learning, of executive functions and literacy. And I want you to think about 2 things that you can do in your context. So science and research suggests that when we set an intention, we have a greater chance of gaining something from an experience, and that it's priming our brain. So I invite you to set a personal intention. You might even jot it down on a sticky note on your computer or on your desk, in your journal. And we have a few minutes together. So I would love to hear a few people share what their intentions are. You are all in the schools, in the classrooms. You are the experts. We want to hear from you. And yes, like Gretchen said, you can inspire others by dropping your intentions in the chat or coming off of mute and sharing. I see Nicole. I see some people off the video. I see Kristen. I see Sophia. I see Michelle. Would love to hear any intentions we have from today.
I put mine in the chat, but I'm happy to share. I was just saying that we have a lot of new colleagues in our office, and I want to make sure that they all feel valued and included, because just as we want to do that for our students, we need to make sure that we're doing that with our colleagues as well. And I know like the actual literal pain of feeling excluded, so I want to make sure that my colleagues do not feel that way.
Thank you for sharing. Invite other voices as well.
I'm going to come off mute to say that I feel welcomed and included by Michelle. Thank you for your intentions. They are coming through very strongly.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Sophia, this is what I mean. You are all the experts. You're on the ground doing the work. Sophia's facilitating a book club on belonging using the book Design for Belonging. That's incredible. Oh, yeah, here, I'm not sure if it's Anna or Anna. I don't want to pronounce your name incorrectly, but she says, shifting the idea that emotions and the logic and brain function are separate to support students' authentic growth and development when writing curriculum. Yes. Anna. As we start groups, planning some activities to support belonging and trust. Yes, yes. Melanie says, setting aside time for children, students, and my own to process and share during situations that can be challenging. Open up the cognitive load. Yes, I love that. Encourage other voices. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. If you want to take a picture of this QR code, we have a short exit ticket. We work with teachers across the country, and we just want to make sure that this session was helpful to you. So we welcome any feedback. Like I said, we'll have a short newsletter with all of the links and videos and slides from today. So that can be helpful to you. Gretchen put the link to the exit ticket in the chat. Yes, like Gretchen says, oxytocin is in fact a cognitive unloader. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for taking that exit ticket and giving us your feedback. We are so glad that you joined us today on this Thursday afternoon. Happy Friday Eve. And Michelle or Erin, I don't know if either of you, turning it back to you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. That was excellent. I mean, a lot of knowledge in the past hour. Yikes. I wrote down quite a bit, and it's such rich learning. Thank you. I dropped a few links in the chat, but just want to remind everyone that we do have these free online learning modules that both Aaron and Jasmine were talking about earlier. And the part 1 around executive functions and literacy is truly amazing, really eye-opening, to make the connection between, you know, the science and of learning and development and the science of reading. And we also invite you to join us again next week. Next week, we'll be joined by TNTP, who will be sharing some learning with us on the science of reading and effective foundational skills instruction. If you haven't yet registered for next week's session, you can do that. The link is in the chat. And then the following week, we'll be joined by NCII, who will be presenting on data-based individual. Oh, I always mix up his word. Data-based individualization. Just have to say it slowly. And so we really hope to see you at our upcoming workshops. And if you want any more information about the RII grant and about Project Arise, you can join our listserv to receive updates and newsletters about all the upcoming workshops over the next few years, as well as different resources that we'll be sharing. We also have a website available that has all the information in one place, and you can always email us if you have any questions about Project Arise. So we thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you to Jasmine and to Gretchen for sharing your expertise with us. Amazing. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Have a great evening, everyone.
Happy Thursday, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.